So the Bay Area Council is a business association. We represent the largest employers in the whole Bay Area, the 9-county Bay Area. So that's Marin and Napa and Sonoma, but also San Francisco and Silicon Valley. We've been around for about 70 years. And transportation is a perennial concern for us because when you survey Bay Area residents, the number one or number two issue, number one or number two problem in the Bay Area is always traffic. And so the Bay Area Council is proud to have worked on a number of projects. One of them that we're somewhat famous for is BART. But another project that we worked on was the Richmond Centerfell Bridge. And in the 1950s, we caused a bunch of studies to be commissioned. Some we did ourselves, but some were done by others. And we helped pass the legislation to create that beautiful bridge that's out there. Certainly utilitarian and helpful to us. Sometimes in the Bay Area, in our weaker moments, we have an attitude that it can't be done. We say people oversimplify things. They don't understand how complex it is. And those are not our best moments. We have better moments. And I would think of, in 2007, there was a tanker, a gasoline tanker that crashed in the MacArthur Maze. Does everybody remember that? It spilled gasoline all over the place. Luckily, the driver survived basically fine. But the MacArthur Maze did not. This is the approach to the Bay Bridge. And that project was determined, the economy was at stake, everybody's travel to work was at stake, and everyone expedited that project. And it was done in how many days? 25 days. Very close, very close. We can get stuff done. In 1989, the earthquake, Loma Prieta, knocked out the Bay Bridge. A third lane was put on the Richmond Centerfell Bridge like that to deal with the traffic that was going on. And actually, for the first 20 years of that bridge's life, it had a third lane on it. Right now, obviously, it doesn't. And so the situation is that pretty much every day, there's a 7-mile backup from that bridge, and it jams up the roads in all directions. We've looked this up, and drivers suffer 4,500 hours of delay each day during the evening commute alone. And they contribute an additional 88,500 pounds of avoidable greenhouse gas emissions to our air. So we have a special opportunity here. How often in the Bay Area do we have a relatively easy, relatively inexpensive fix to a major problem? Well, we have one here. We need to seize this opportunity and get this lane done. The obstacles, which we may or may not get into today, but, to getting this traffic relief done are processes really that trip up projects around the Bay Area. There are swamps of studies, overly drawn out timelines, and sometimes a general lack of urgency. This is not an indictment of one person or one agency. As a matter of fact, good people who want to do good things stand on all sides of this problem. But in the end, our exploration of this project started about 14 years ago, at least in this form, and it won't be completed for maybe 2, 3, 4 more years, while thousands of people sit in traffic. That's an indictment of our region, and I believe that's an indictment of all of us. So we should do something about it. My position and my organization's position is that we can make the Richmond Bridge third lane an example that we can get it done. And done fast and efficiently. So let's all of us show people we care about their frustration, we care about those greenhouse gas emissions, and we want to work with all urgency to make their lives better, and our lives better. And then let's learn the lessons from that project and apply them to other projects across our region. So let me ask all of you to listen to a great group of speakers that we have today who are working hard on this project, so that you can have the latest information. After you've heard the speakers, you should respectfully push all of us to work harder and faster. And ask, if we say we can't, why we can't. There may be good reasons, but maybe they aren't so good. You should find out. Finally, don't be silent. Either tonight or as this project moves along, if you keep respectfully pushing, you will help get this project done. You will be able to drive in that third lane and see the traffic reduction happening and quietly say to yourself, I helped make that happen. So that's our goal today. Let me introduce our first speaker, Steve Kinsey. He's been doggedly pursuing this project for years. He's a true regionalist after our Bay Area Council heart. And he served on numerous regional boards, including chairing, of course, most importantly for this discussion, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And he's been a supervisor in Marin County for almost 20 years now. Please welcome Steve Kinsey to share his thoughts.
Thank you very much, John. And I do want to start by thanking the Bay Area Council and the North Bay Leadership Council for this invitation to speak to folks. This is an important project, and you obviously are stepping up to engage us as decision makers and local officials, but also to inform the community and to get the community's interest behind making things happen more quickly. I'm not going to take you up on the challenge to pour gasoline all over this bridge to make it go faster, but I am going to say that we can all do better, and I take you up on that challenge. I also want to say, I want to thank others who are in this room tonight too, not just the folks who invited us here, but Caltrans for being here, the Bay Area Toll Authority for being here, our Transportation Authority, which is our Marin County Transportation Planning and Financing Agency. And although they're not here tonight, we've had significant engagement with the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, which is our counterpart on the east side landing for this Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. And we've had great involvement from the city of Richmond and their community as well, because they have interests that also have to be addressed. So a lot of folks have already put a lot of energy, time, and thought into this project. And in the last year, since we at TAM went to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and asked for their support and assistance, we have accomplished a number of really important things. Most importantly, we've gotten all of the agencies working together and recognizing this to be a priority problem worth solving. In addition to that, we've identified where the funding could come from. And so many projects that we can identify are left on the sidelines because we don't know where the money's going to come from. On top of that, the technical challenges of what is going to happen to make this a reality have also been resolved for the most part, by and large. There still remains some things to work out, but the majority of the issues have been resolved or at least anticipated. And you know, I will use this as just a moment to correct the assumption that this is just a paint job, that the lane was here and all we have to do is open it and start driving on it. There are some aspects of that that are obviously true. It was a third lane before, it's been used during emergencies as a third lane, we can do it again. But if we're going to do it permanently, the world has changed since it was a consistent third lane. Cutting Boulevard has now been converted into I-580, a lot more traffic, Richmond Parkway. We have to undertake the long-term safety for folks that are crossing this bridge as they approach the Richmond Parkway exit so that we don't get the traffic moving at high speeds across that bridge only to be stopped around a blind curve as we put them too close to a large retaining wall on the Contra Costa side. So there's things that have to be studied further, permits that are needed, and none of us want to take out the cautionary aspects of that process that we've put in place for California. But I do agree that what has happened over time as we've become so cautionary, so protective, and so interested in resolving all of the conflicts that could come towards us, that we've almost disabled or paralyzed ourselves from recognizing common sense and moving forward when it's in front of us. And it certainly is in front of us here. Now, there are two projects on one bridge. There is the third lane eastbound. There is also a project for a Bay Trail extension across from the Richmond side to the Marin County side on the upper deck. They're independent projects. They have their own timelines. They have their own budgets. They're one bridge. And what we will do if the Commission approves these two projects at its committee on Wednesday and later in the month at the full Commission hearings, these two projects will move forward under one planning umbrella, but separately with their own timelines, as I said. So we know what needs to be done. Now we just need to get it done. And I think what you'll see in this presentation tonight is there are things that we do know how to move forward on. What this meeting should be doing is inspiring all of us, and especially those of us in elected office and in positions of influence within the transportation world, to take some risks, to make, not to cut corners, but to have the confidence that the decisions that we're making are the right ones, and to move this project forward more quickly. What you'll see in the timelines is that there are years in the permitting and planning process for this. And we can't afford that. We want to see this project happen more quickly. So the real focus, I think, will be on that, at least for myself, is how can I work with all of you, all the agencies, to get a good idea into reality more quickly. I want to just say a couple other things and then turn it over to my colleague who's the president of the Board of Supervisors in Marin County. Fixing this bridge is important, but it isn't going to solve that 7-mile backup by itself. There are still going to be problems. Sir Francis Drake hasn't been addressed. The long-term solutions for a 580-101 connector that's direct as opposed to something that comes across Sir Francis Drake is really what is ultimately needed. Ramp metering that's going to be happening along 101 is actually going to be helpful. Each of these incremental improvements we can make are intended to make our lives better, move the traffic more efficiently, but no one project by itself is going to solve the entire congestion backup that we have. But I'm confident that working together with this group of folks and with support from the public, we can show the Bay Area that this is a project that can get done. We can beat the timelines that are there today, and we can all feel some relief in our evening commutes. So with that, I'd like to invite Supervisor Rice to come forward and share her thoughts. Thank you.
Well, I think that Steve pretty much had it all covered there, John. I had a couple things to add. One, the good news is, or the bad news is we have this problem. We've got a traffic crisis, and I appreciate the picture that Steve pointed. It's more than just the bridge. The bridge is a big, huge chunk of it. We have to have that capacity there. But there's other pieces too, and we need to look at these traffic issues holistically. So I think that's really important. Good news is we're all in the same room, and the agencies are working together, and a lot of progress has been made. And I want to also extend my thanks to Assemblyman Marc Levine and Senator Mike McGuire for your help in Sacramento now and going forward, and also your support of trying to get this project done. My focus is primarily on the traffic piece, the third lane piece of this project, and I appreciate that the agencies have been able to split the two, the bike lane and the third lane. But I also gather there's some efficiencies to doing part of that work together. So I think it's appropriate to note that they are all on the same bridge. So to me, the attention and focus that this third lane has gotten really tells me that everyone's got it. The project is critically important towards relieving a regional bottleneck and also relieving the backup it creates on our local streets and roads. It's got significance for commuters and residents in 2 counties and beyond, and to our local and regional economies. So I'm here tonight as board president to add my voice to the call for action, my support to the agencies to continue working together, my call to residents to continue pushing. I do think it takes pushing and pressure, and I think it could be respectful, and I think it could be really constructive, and I think it's also behooves us as electeds to get the word out about what the challenges are. That's beyond just striping a lane. We have to deal with a pretty major issue on the east side with that retaining wall. Safety has to be concerned, but I have a lot of confidence that we can be, and the agencies can be, creative and efficient and get this project done. This is an opportunity, and I think we as electeds serving the public and as public agencies need to seize on opportunities to have real successes and show the public that we can get things done timely, efficiently, quickly, creatively, and with goodwill and good spirit. So I'm a cheerleader for this, and I'll also push hard, but I appreciate the work done so far and look forward to the presentation.
Diane Steinhauser, who's the head of the Transportation Authority of Marin, to tell us a little bit about that project.
Good evening. I am going to be telling you a little bit about the project. So, you know, we found this presentation to be useful. Go ahead and ask questions if anything pops into your mind, but I'd appreciate if you waited to the end of the presentation, because we probably will cover what it is you're thinking about. You know, I just want to say in my 35 years of working in transportation in the Bay Area, that it is very fortuitous that we have agencies supporting this who are willing to fund it, are willing to be flexible, and looking for opportunities to make this go faster. But it is a complicated project. And I think that we've got all the right people at the table now. We're dealing with all the issues. I mean, we've dealt with a lot of them over the last year, and hopefully you'll see that in the presentation. And we'll be able to see this come to fruition in the next couple of years. So, obviously the project goals are to provide congestion relief in Marin County. We're going to also be closing a gap in the Bay Trail system with the bike path on the upper deck. It goes from the Contra Costa side over to the Marin side and vice versa. And then really our support for transportation options is what this project is all about, along with congestion relief. I think both of those are equally important aspects to the project. The major project elements are the eastbound third lane on the lower deck and a 10-foot barrier separated bike pedestrian path on the upper deck. Now, one thing that it needs to be recognized is when you get off the Richmond Bridge over by the toll plaza on the other side, bikes can currently use the shoulder of the interstate. This is rare, but it's in effect. So we have to accommodate those cyclists that are trying to get from Point Richmond out to what is really developing as a nice recreational area out at Point Malati. So if we're going to use the shoulder for cars, we need to provide a path for the bikes so that they don't have the shoulder anymore to use. And that's really what the bike pedestrian connection over in Contra Costa is. It's taking the bikes off the shoulder, yay. Nobody wants to see bikes on the shoulder of an interstate. Putting them on a barrier separated path, that's been resolved and is part of the project. And thanks to MTC, to Chevron, City of Richmond, the bike coalitions on both sides to put that together and make that happen. The bi-directional bicycle lane on the upper deck is also a part of the project. And this is all kind of a complex of traffic lane and bike and pedestrian lane, both on the bridge. And thank heavens we have the space on the bridge to do this. This isn't always available to us when we look at these kinds of solutions. Basically, the third eastbound lane, we call it a shoulder lane, is going to extend from the Sir Francis Drake on-ramp directly onto the bridge. So that traffic, which is a considerable amount of traffic, will not have to merge into 580. So there's a lot of traffic coming off Drake. There's 2 full lanes of traffic on 580. 3 lanes now have to merge into 2. That's the reason for the backup. 580 backs up the entire length from the foot of the bridge all the way to 101. It's about 2.3 miles. And the effect on Drake and the traffic waiting on 101 is substantial. And you can see that in the 7 miles of congestion that was referenced earlier. Right now, the lane on the lower deck is going to be operated for the peak period only. So it'll be a system, maybe some of you have seen this in Phoenix or other parts of the country. There'll be a green arrow saying use the lane. During these hours, there'll be a red X that says don't use the lane during these hours. And that's how the system is going to be operated. It's a pilot project. This is something new for the owners of the interstate, both Caltrans and FHWA in California. They are committing to trying this for a period of 4 years, seeing how it operates. Surprisingly, there's a lot of people that end up having to pull over and use the call boxes with a broken down vehicle. If there's no shoulder, we have to make sure we can accommodate those people with better incident response, tow trucks, emergency management, etc. So that's all part of the project also, is to make sure that that happens. This is kind of a useful diagram. There's these little white numbers are the traffic that exists now. There's quite a bit of traffic on 580, and an equally large amount coming off of Drake, and it's approaching the bridge, and it's too much for the bridge to handle. That's the situation. One interesting factoid from this slide is you have a lot of people jumping off of 580 at San Quentin and jumping back on. It's the famous queue jumping, which people do. this 900 cars getting on right here, combined with all this traffic on 580 and on Drake, is what is overloading that approach to the bridge. And there will be a barrier along this little Main Street frontage road area. There's been a lot of concern expressed by San Quentin Village and people in that area that because of all this traffic they can't get to their homes, because this is a single access point for those folks off of Drake and off of this location. And so with 3 lanes now on the bridge, it will allow a lot of additional traffic bottled up trying to merge to actually have free access onto the bridge. This is a picture of that Main Street on-ramp. It's rather constrained. It's going to be rebuilt so that there'll be a 3rd lane up here in that wide shoulder area. You can see that right there. And traffic will still be able to get on and merge onto the bridge from San Quentin, from this Main Street area. You know, there's been some claims that we should be able to go out and restripe this and open up this lane. It used to be there. All true. It involves a little more work, especially with these new sign support structures that are going to have the green arrows and the red X's, and all that we have to do on the approach to make these ramps still viable, and what we have to do on the other end. So the project's a little more complicated than just striping in the lane that used to be there. Now you're off the bridge now, and you've gone past the toll plaza, which is over here on this left side over here, and you're coming around the bend, and you're going to take the exit to Marin Street, which is the exit to the Richmond Parkway. There's a lot of traffic that's exiting, almost a whole lane's worth of traffic exiting to the Richmond Parkway. So it's good to drop the lane there because traffic is getting off the interstate anyway, and that's what the plan is. But as you can see, there's a very large wall and a very tiny shoulder. So the wall has to be moved back. The good news is that it can be done. It's going to cost some additional money. That's built into the estimates. It can be done at the same time the other structural work is done to rebuild ramps, etc. So it doesn't necessarily hold up the project, but it is a necessary feature to the project. Now, another reason the wall, and this is just some detail on the wall, is this fact right here. Without moving the wall, the safe speed is 43 miles an hour. And, you know, that, we want a safe speed of 55 or 60 miles an hour, because I don't know if all of you are going to slow down to 40 miles an hour, probably not. So that's why freeways are designed, and we're trying to design this one accordingly to accommodate the natural, the higher flow of traffic and the higher speeds that traffic is going to travel. So that's kind of some information on the length of the wall. Now the pathway, this blue section is where you get on from, this is a big entrance to Chevron right here. This is a local off-ramp that goes over to Point Richmond into the Richmond Parkway. This blue is the existing path. This green is going to be a new path segment which takes you right up to the foot of the bridge. And that's barrier separated, in fact. There it is right there. This is where it goes over what we call the Schofield Bridge. There's a big set of pipes over here that Chevron manages, very sensitive and secure installation. And that's what that path will look like. So you'll be protected from the traffic lanes, and that's a bi-directional 10-foot path that will, and it's right over here, that will take you right off at that off-ramp, and then you'll wind around and come across state property and get back up here on the bridge. The bike pedestrian path on the upper deck is going to be 10 feet wide. That's a standard width for bikes and pedestrians. It's going to be protected from the adjacent traffic by a movable barrier. The idea is not to have to move the barrier very often, but if it has to be moved for maintenance purposes, it could be. There'll need to be some increase in rail height on the outer rail of the bridge, but it is a bi-directional 10-foot pathway. A huge commitment made by the department, bravo, to allow that to happen on the upper deck with a movable barrier in place in case there is some need to share the shoulder, which was one concept that's been talked about a lot is if we need to share the shoulder, how do we do that? Well, a movable barrier allows you to do that more easily. Incident management, I talked a little bit, closed-circuit TV cameras, tie-in with the MTC Caltrans Traffic Management Center, good incident response, etc. Because, again, when you take that shoulder and use it for bikes, you have to make sure you can accommodate vehicles that break down. And that is part of the piloting aspect, is let's try this, let's make sure that we can manage incidents when they occur, and then we'll kind of see where we want to go in the long term. So this also is going to be looked at as a pilot project. The budget, there's been a lot of talk about this. The overall complex of projects at this point in time is $74 million, which has been committed to by the Bay Area Toll Authority in an action last July. Thank you, Bay Area Toll Authority. It's hard to come up with $74 million. Believe me, I know that for a fact. The third lane eastbound, it's a little higher in cost than what was originally estimated because of that retaining wall, the incident management, some of the features on the structure with the red-green peak period usage only. So that's gone up a little bit between last July and now. The bike path has gone down a little bit on the upper deck. The cost of moving the bike path is not included. And again, that would be absorbed in other budget elements that are managed by the Bay Area Toll Authority and Caltrans. There's a contingency remaining, and so that's where the cost is right now. As we refine the project and we develop details, the costs get more and more refined. So the team is feeling pretty confident about these costs as they stand now, which is about 8 months after when we started. I think our last slide here is schedule. This is when the lane is scheduled to be open to traffic in early to mid-2018. Our next speaker is going to talk about opportunities for making that go faster. One of those opportunities is going to be taken up by the Bay Area Toll Authority this Wednesday, which is doing the design and the environmental at the same time. So you merge this whole set of bars right here, and these two, excuse me, the environmental document and the design, and trying to speed that up and do them at the same time should reduce some time for this project. We're all as a team aware, and your presence here this evening is an exclamation point on that, of the need to go as fast as possible with this. So we're looking at opportunities to compress this even more. But we believe there's some opportunity in this schedule still to go a little faster. All the environmental studies will be done in accordance with the California and national environmental laws. Those take some time. I always say it's the thing that makes this such a wonderful place to live, is that we protect all of those resources. We have major permits we have to get from a variety of state and federal resource agencies. To the extent we can get them to go faster, we're looking at that as an option. I do want to recognize and thank Assemblyman Marc Levine, who kind of did a, hey, can we go faster bit of legislation, which I think kind of got us all fine-tuned and has all of our leaders here this evening taking this as seriously as they can in terms of speeding this up. So stay tuned for more on the schedule. I think that your presence here is kind of an indicator of how we need to do a little better there. And that's the end of the presentation. If there are no questions, I'm going to introduce the next speaker, John.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Any questions? Wow.
Well, we also can do questions after.
We will.
That's okay.
We're not leaving.
I think this is probably the place where everybody expects some grand solution to pop out and make the project go quicker. What I can do, though, is commit to everybody in the room that we are going to continue to work together with the agencies that are represented here, in particular the owner and operator of the bridge and the highway, Caltrans, to try to figure out how to do better than that schedule. But as Diane mentioned and as Supervisor Kinsey mentioned, there are quite a few challenges that I don't think are quite so obvious when you look at the bridge itself. I wanted to point to a couple of things that really are important to recognize in terms of what we have done to remove obstacles to this point. And so Wednesday, as Steve mentioned, we're going to be at the Nevada Oversight Committee meeting. The agenda is already posted. The item is on the web. You're welcome to take a look at it. And it really is intended to codify quite a few things that have been a problem up to this point in figuring out how to do both of these projects. So when we do big civil public works projects, finding the money in time for the activity is usually one of the big challenges. And as Diane mentioned, the authority has already approved the money. We are advancing the design effort in Wednesday's meeting to coincide with the ability to be able to do design work in parallel with the environmental work. The most important piece of that item that is up for discussion on Wednesday, though, is what we call a draft decision document or decision document that really spells out and defines the sticking points that have been the trouble points for these two projects. So we've been working with the local staff and headquarters staff at Caltrans. That decision document, which will be approved to sign by our executive director, and we're hoping that Caltrans will take the same lead. We did work on it together, but it's obviously not signed yet. But the idea is that decision document lays out the parameters of both projects. And that actually should simplify the design process quite a bit, because we won't be studying multiple alternatives. The four corners of the project are pretty well defined. We can take a look, I think, in some of the areas around the word pilot to see if it makes sense to invest a lot of money into certain items that may not be permanent. I think that is also an opportunity for us maybe to accelerate some of the pieces of work. And also reduce some of the costs. The things, though, that we do need to continue work on, and I think they affect really that star, that blue star that was in the last slide, and that is trying to figure out, first of all, are we doing just the amount of environmental work that is necessary to get the operations of the roadway improved? And two, are we doing everything we can to first turn in good work product for the department to evaluate, and then get good return back in terms of the review times. We are committed to working with Caltrans as a team on it. We like to try to avoid the double work of oversight and figure out how to make a team that's actually just moving the project forward. You know, the idea of delivering projects quicker applies not only to this project, but everything that we do. The sooner we get the projects out, the cheaper they are, because you avoid a lot of the escalation costs, and the sooner that the public gets the benefit from them. So we do think we can do better in the environmental process and review. We do think that we can do some overlap of the design work in conjunction with the environmental work, and we're confident that we should be able to put out the project maybe in different ways than the normal project delivery, and deliver pieces of it if possible. But it's going to be very important that when the project gets opened up on day one, that the public knows how to operate that facility. And I think it's also very incumbent on us, too, to make sure that what we are providing is safe ingress and egress, so that when you get into Richmond, that you've got a facility that works and operates well. Because as Diane showed in the traffic slide, there's really a full lane of traffic that is exiting that bridge and heading down the Richmond Parkway. So there's a lot of pieces and components too. I probably went right by the one that I think actually has been one of the longer sticking points, and that is the decision to get bikes off the 580 shoulder and behind a barrier separated bridge. That's a problem that's actually behind us conceptually. Caltrans has given us exceptions for removing the shoulder on the westbound side in Contra Costa. We've gotten concessions from the bike community to have somewhat substandard bike path in that area. We approach about 9.5 feet for parts of that bridge crossing at Schofield. So those are all, I think, extremely important elements that are going to pay dividends as we move the project forward, and they aren't all that obvious today when we're looking at a whole series of steps that we need to do. So I think in a nutshell, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. Bijan, is there anything you'd like to add?
Not really. I just wanted to be here, first of all, to show the department's full support as we go about getting this project into implementation and getting to the environmental process and the design process. And Andy mentioned and Diane mentioned, there's been a lot of work that's been done, and this project has a long history, and it's had a lot of ups and downs. But I think for us to be able to address really the traffic needs in this area, and also not just the car portion of the project, which is the lane on the lower deck, but also the multimodal and making sure that there is equity in providing access for the bicyclists in this corridor has been an important piece of our conversation. And of course, as Diane mentioned and Andy also mentioned, there's a lot of complexity. It is very encouraging to see that people as busy as members of the Board of Supervisors and the Commission know so much about the detail of the project that reflects how much we've been talking about this, and hopefully this will help us in advancing the project quicker. And also having the members of the legislature here to show their support and also offering their assistance as we go about doing this project. The problems is obvious to everyone. In a lot of cases, it was cited when we have emergencies, we've got very, very capable people in responding. When the goal is very clear, the mission is understood, we can get there. I think we have examples of a lot of projects up and down the state, and especially in this region, that the debate on the project itself and on the concept is what really takes a lot of time. And that's one of the values that we have, to make sure that there's full disclosure and transparency and the public participation in that. When all of those are behind us, and of course the money that is available for the project, then I think things move a lot faster. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I didn't have anything prepared to say, but very encouraged of the meeting tonight and the conversation that we're going to have.
Assemblymember Marc Levine to come up, and the Assemblymember has proposed a bill, 157, to do whatever I think his goal is, and he'll tell us more about this, is to do whatever he can to help out his constituents in this matter. And so it's great that you're here. We really appreciate it, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Thanks to the Bay Area Council, to the North Bay Leadership Council, and Marin Sanitary for hosting this evening. You know, the only thing worse than sitting in traffic is hearing politicians and bureaucrats talk about traffic. You know, I think all of us here have sat in it and have experienced it ourselves. I certainly have, as has my wife and our neighbors. And so to actually hear people talk about this project and to see the presentation that Diane gave us and really have it come to life is very helpful, I think, for me, but also hopefully for our community. It's an extraordinarily frustrating problem. And the motivation I had for AB 157 was really to get this thing happening as fast as possible, as safely as possible. And I feel very glad to hear that it has motivated the agencies to respond. When we first looked at this project and we thought that a third lane could take until 2018, I think all of us were shaking our heads thinking, no, that's just not fast enough. We can do a whole lot better for our community. And to hear in advance of the meeting that they may be moving the design work at the same time as the environmental work is a very positive thing. It means that you know, someone over at the state is paying attention to our local needs. And that's just something that is very gratifying to me as your representative, and for someone who thinks that we can go a whole lot faster on this project. I think AB 157 can continue to be helpful. And so this is an opportunity for the community, for the agencies, the county, to really let us know, to let me know, how can we help push this along even faster, if it's possible. And so we're available to you for when those opportunities come up, to see if there's something that we can do to put this third lane on the expressway. And so I certainly hope that it's seen as that. I hope that we walk out of this room feeling a bit more confident that this project will be completed in a timely manner and help people get home to their families in a way that, you know, improves our quality of life and also our environment. Thank you.
You know, now is the time to ask questions, and I probably won't answer any of them, and we'll turn them to everybody else. But David.
I'm David Schoenbrunn with Transdev, and I have been active on this issue for maybe a year, basically since the Greenbury Interchange project blew up. I think several things are striking about what I've heard tonight. The first is there's been an absence of transparency in terms of what's going on at agencies. I've spoken to this issue, nothing changed in relation to that. So tonight is the first time that I've heard that there's a desire to move that retaining wall. What strikes me as commonsensical and obviously did not occur to people in the agencies is the idea of an interim solution. What we should be thinking about is something that moves traffic now rather than 2018. And if the issue is a 43-mile-an-hour safe speed on the east side of the bridge, hey, we have dealt with this in the past. The S-curve on the Bay Bridge had a 35-mile-an-hour limit. It had rumble strips. If there was a need to do so, you could have heavy CHP enforcement. But there's no reason why traffic could not be opened now, not in 2018, with a reduced speed in that area, with movable signs instead of waiting for lane marking signs to be available. This is what you do if you have a crisis. I'm convinced that these agencies truly do not see this situation as a crisis, whereas people who are residents of these counties do. And so I see the need for an interim solution, and I should also mention I file CEQA cases. I filed one just today, in fact. And I don't see a rationale for environmental review here. I've been waiting for somebody to show it to me. Nobody has given me a legal memo that explains the rationale for that. But I think this has been overpapered, this project. And it has not been stripped down to the simplicity of, hey, we can actually paint these lanes, put in movable signs, and get this thing solved now. And I'd like to hear why that can't be done.
Thank you for that. So I guess the question is could we do a temporary solution, in the meantime? And I don't know who feels prepared to be able to answer a question like that. Diane, Andy, Bijan?
Well, I'll take a first stab at it, but I do think that probably need to rely a little bit on some help from Bijan. I don't think that it's easy to walk away from design standards without doing an effective analysis of what that might do. I think what we have produced here is a project that will live on from not only it being opened safely, but operate well into the future. And I don't think spending a few months taking that into consideration is a waste of effort. 43 miles an hour on an interstate system is not the kind of solution that you want to provide for permanency.
The solution right now is 20 miles an hour. That's what people are experiencing now, or 0 miles an hour. Which is better?
I also want to point out that we talked in the slide presentation about the merge from San Quentin onto the bridge. That again is an area that currently is quite substandard. So if you drive the bridge today, you see the flashing lights, the amber lights. That's because that access point coming onto the bridge is currently unsafe. We need to improve that, and we do so by making it a much more straight approach that allows us to use the west end of the bridge here more effectively, because you're dumping 3 lanes onto what is currently 2. Again, I don't disagree that the improvement is needed. We all support it, but I don't believe it's appropriate to put in a solution that is so temporary that you might risk the lives of other folks. I just don't think that makes sense in the long run.
Let me just take a few seconds talking about the same issue. I think we're all trying to find ways of taking appropriate risk of getting the project done. But we also are mindful that if the project is successful in the fact of moving the 20-mile-an-hour traffic that you just cited, then that traffic will not be moving at 20 miles an hour. It will be moving at a much faster speed. And getting him to the other side and having him to come to potentially stop of a vehicle that is disabled on that lane with not having enough sight distance, I think is something that that we're looking after and want to make sure that we're addressing that. That does not mean that we're not going to be looking at appropriate risk in the various elements of the project. And that's how we've got to where we are today. This is a project that was not approved in 2007. We tried very hard and we could not get there. And we have opened this up and I think we're trying to find a way to actually complete this project and get it done. And with that comes a lot of the risk assessment and the risk management and appropriate risk for the traffic in order to be able to do what was outlined today. And I think we've made tremendous advances in that area. I know those who sit in this traffic every day would like to not sit in that traffic tomorrow. Not next week, but tomorrow. But the reality of it is that it is going to take a bit longer than that before we can actually get there. I think we're open to looking at various ways of accelerating this. I think there is enough support at the state, the county level, the local level, regional level, for us to do that. And the department is standing here to make sure that all of those are considered as we go about making decisions to put both the bike and the cars on the both decks of this bridge.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Robert Bassman. I live in Tiburon. I work in the city, stuck in the traffic northbound mostly every day. And so really appreciate the presentation, appreciate the coordination seemingly across agencies. As someone who sits in that pretty much every day, I have to say, I think the timeline through 2018, and I'm not an engineer, I'm not a financial analyst, I have to give the feedback that I think that's really unacceptable. And so it's 3+ years from today. And so I think fully realize there's more complexity than you probably understand. But in terms of potential stopgap solutions or interim solutions, I think we need to really think harder on this. And again, I'm not nuanced, this project's very nuanced, but even if, for instance, let's say we didn't have the retaining wall issue and we just created a third lane and we allowed the bottleneck to occur at the end of the bridge, that would probably give us how many miles of potential backup, which would not flow into the 101. The 101 now, as you guys know, backs up sometimes to the bridge, and it's getting to Tiburon takes 30 to 40 minutes. And it's maddening because it seems like such a simple solution. And so really appreciate all the communication, coordination. Respectfully, I think this timeline is quite frankly unacceptable.
Sure.
Dan, is there any statistics on measuring the percentage of where the origin of traffic flow is coming from? Are these people avoiding Highway 37 and coming from farther up north, and then thus backing up 101 north where people are trying to cut off at Larkspur Landing, and that just gets backed up because of that? Or is it strictly people leaving from Marin County to go back to the East Bay? And what is it like in the morning coming in the opposite direction?
Well, all good questions. Let me answer what I can.
I guess what I'm getting at is this more than just handling the bridge and this one little area? Is there something farther up north that needs to get handled so there isn't so much mass coming to the bridge at that time? I know they don't want to go 37 because that's really not fun.
No. About 10% of the traffic that's coming to this point and starting to approach the bridge is coming from the Golden Gate Bridge. So, that's not a huge amount, but, it's something. The majority of the traffic crossing here, interestingly, is coming southbound on Mile 1. So it's coming from San Rafael northward.
Right.
All right. There is a considerable amount, though, coming northbound on 101 that originates in Marin. So really, it's a very small percentage of coming across the Golden Gate. But, you know, if you work in downtown San Francisco and you see all that they're doing, trying to build the Transbay Terminal and extend the 3rd Street Muni, et cetera, maybe there's some people that are choosing to bypass and come through. Hard to believe, but maybe true. You know, what we do know is that we've got a lot of varied pairs of origins and destinations now. You've all noticed northbound 101 traffic traveling to Santa Rosa in the morning is much heavier than it used to be. And that's kind of a reverse commute component that we didn't see 10 years ago. We've got very heavy traffic in the afternoon coming both directions. You know, we believe that relieving this bottleneck is going to help. It helps all those groups. Coming across the bridge, you know, this is another interesting question. And what about the lane on the upper deck? You know, should this eventually be a vehicular lane? At this point in time, Contra Costa, our sister agencies, and MTC and BATA say, no, we're not ready to make that a car lane. Will that demand possibly increase in the future? Maybe. Part of the reason for this being a movable barrier and a pilot is to keep an eye on that. You know, should we be thinking in the future about converting the upper deck to a peak period lane? But when you get off on the other side, just like we've got the challenges in Richmond, you're going to have challenges on the other side where that lane takes off on Drake, crosses Anderson, or you go up 580 to Bellum, etc. So I think the best point is we take time to study this to make sure that relieving the problem doesn't create an insurmountable problem somewhere else. And someone brought up the idea of, you know, ending this lane at the bridge, whoops, and you know, let's end the lane, you know, before you get around this curve. Well, now you're stacking the traffic on the bridge, and it's sitting in stop and go conditions on the bridge, which has its own whole set of problems with access and the like. So we're trying to make logical decisions on the operations, and to make sure we're not creating a significant bottleneck somewhere else. That's kind of the goal of the project.
We're actually over our time right now, and so what I would try and be respectful to all of your time is do 2 more questions, if that's okay, and we'll wrap it there. So, Cynthia.
Thank you. Diane, thank you for that. I think it's important to remember 60% of the people who work in Marin don't live here, so we do have a substantial problem because of the lack of workforce housing. I really appreciated David saying he won't file a sequel lawsuit. That should knock a couple of years off, or maybe a couple $1 million. Thank you so much, David. I think one of the things that really bugs me, and I agree with David and the other speakers, is we do need an interim solution, and I think we haven't tried hard enough to do it. And one of my suggestions would be, I know that they use shoulders sometimes for HOV lanes when there's peak traffic. Why don't we open this up just during peak commute times so that you minimize the usage of it, but at least it's there for when we need it for commute times. So I think we need to really look at that. On CEQA, we were able to waive CEQA for sports arenas, for the water pipe when we needed to bring the water in. It seems like there's precedence there, and we could waive CEQA, and I would love to see that waived. And I think it's something that too often government gets caught up in that of all the can'ts and the things that slow things down. And the world is moving very quickly, and it's time for government to figure out how to be more flexible and get things done. And I really appreciate Assemblyman Levine's trying to speed it up. And I think where there's a will, there's a way, and I'd like to see more will.
I'll finish with you, Paul. I apologize that I can't do all the questions, but they will be around and they are not going away, so there'll be other times to ask questions too.
Question and comment. First of all, the question fundamentally is, can the Main Street Bridge on the west end of the bridge accommodate 3 lanes. The reason I ask that question is I used to work in Oakland and commute this way every day, kind of reverse commute from what we're talking about. But I remember seeing that retaining wall go in, and it's just a real shame that now we have to spend millions of dollars to take out a retaining wall that was built, I think, less than a decade ago. So if we go through and we get 3 lanes on the bridge and we fix the other end of it, then when we come to get 3 lanes of 580 getting onto the bridge, when we solve that problem of Larkspur or the 101 580 connector, we don't want to then find out we have to wait another 3 to 5 years widening the Main Street Bridge at Point St. Quentin. So that's St. Quentin Village, rather. So first of all, let's really make sure that accommodates 3 lanes. Secondly, when you did 580, the Bellum off-ramp, there were queue jumpers getting off at Bellum, getting back on, and we got some very aggressive moves to stop that. Why don't you do that now? And then the comment is the public really does not understand the split between effectively what you've really laid out clearly tonight, although there's debate about whether or not the timing is right, that there's $30 million to do the lane, $30 million to do the bike path. That's not part of the public discussion on this project and desperately needs to be. So whoever going to sort of take ownership of that message has got to get it out there, because the public and even the local press does not understand that point. And they think, just strike the lane and we can debate the $60 million for bike path later. So communicating that point is really important.
A couple of thoughts. One, the Main Street Bridge is wide enough for a 3rd lane, but the shoulders that approach it probably weren't designed as travel way. So part of our study is to investigate that, so that when you get on a shoulder, it just doesn't degrade immediately. The retaining wall, are you talking about the one on the Point Richmond side?
Yeah.
That was built, I think, in the 80s with the John T. Knox.
Maybe they redid it then, because I remember watching construction there relatively recently.
Yeah. Well, they did work on the Schofield Bridge recently where they redecked it all. That was a maintenance job just to keep the deck life going. But that wall was built when it changed from the cutting boulevard, as Commissioner Kinsey mentioned, to make it the freeway that it is today. Because remember, I don't think it is a small point. In 1974, you drove to the bridge on Cutting Boulevard and you went through stoplights and you got up onto the bridge from a city street. That's not what it is today anymore. It's a freeway on both sides, an interstate freeway. So there have been some significant changes that I think you reflect in the discussion.
So I'm going to break my own rule. You look crestfallen when I said, so I can't do that on my own heart. So, sir, final question.
Thank you. Okay, a couple of observations. When we look at the schedule, it seems that there's about 19 months for the design portion, for the roadway portion, and also a fairly long, it looks like an environmental schedule. It just seems that there ought to be a way to compress those activities. I'm wondering really, well, I guess perhaps you could enlighten us a bit as to what goes on there. Is this being done in-house? Is this an opportunity for a key project? Are there things that can be done to compress both the CEQA NEPA process and as well as the design process?
Absolutely. Look, we're taking the challenge that was given to us by all the folks in the front row here, that we need to figure out a way to compress that. I think the challenge is something that we are willing to take on.
And I think one point you just made, we're actually having consultants helping us in the design of this. BADA has hired consultants working on both the environmental side of this and the design part of this. So I don't think that resource is an issue. And I think we're hearing very clear that this schedule is not an acceptable schedule and we need to be working on it. So I think that is a good message to hear tonight. And one thing before I forget, there was a question or a comment back by that talked about partial use or use of the lane during commute time. That's exactly what we're talking about here. So to be clear, we're talking about the lane to be used during commute time.
Great. Okay, so thank you very much for being here. We're not going away. The Bay Area Council have been here for 70 years. We'll survive through this project too. We're going to stay in touch with you if you've given us your information. There's a sign-up sheet there so we can send you updates as the project moves along. You were great at being at pushing us but being respectful and doing exactly, and that's what we need to continue doing to make this happen. Thank you to everybody, Assemblymember Levine, two supervisors, Caltrans, Bata, Diane Steinhauser, and Senator McGuire's office. And